Welcome to the show. My name is James Nielsen Watt, and in this show we interview interesting, inspiring, and successful people so you can learn the secrets to success and can play the game of life, business, health, and happiness better. And the philosophy we take here is, if I'm leveling up my game, you get to level up yours as well. So get ready to listen to some inspiring people who have figured out how to have success in all areas of life: health, happiness, wealth, business. We're going to be interviewing them in this show so that you can learn the secrets to success that they share with practical advice that you can take and use today. So if you enjoy the show, please subscribe, please leave us a review, and please share it with your friends, because if I can help you and you can help others, then we can help more people together and we can all level up our game together. My guest today is Pejman Ghadimi, a self-made entrepreneur, philosopher, author, and the creator of the wealth transfer methodology. Over the last 20 years, Pejman has built a multitude of businesses ranging from a one-of-a-kind investment firm that focuses on alternative asset management known as one-off investments, to a series of online education businesses for entrepreneurs including Secret Entourage, Exotic Car Hacks, and Watch Trading Academy. These platforms have forced people to rethink their understanding of business, luxury assets, and money management in general. Since the beginning, Pejman's companies have grossed well over $420 million in combined revenue last year alone and have become more successful even during the pandemic. Today, Pejman is a mentor to over 76,000 students from across the globe, and his teachings have created numerous 6, 7, and 8-figure entrepreneurs. Welcome to the show, Pejman. Super excited to have you on. I've been following you a while, and you do some really interesting stuff. Tell us a little bit about you so our audience has got some context.
So first off, I appreciate you having me on, and feel free to call me PJ throughout the show, so it'll make it easier. Most of my friends call me PJ, but my background is in finance. I was the youngest bank manager at 18 in the country, and then became a very, very young VP at 23. Started the entire franchise of basically building banks inside airports by 25. Find myself unemployed, basically being very arrogant at work. People didn't like a young executive in banking that drove an orange Lamborghini to work. That apparently didn't flow very well with the banking system back before '08, you know? So long story short, I started my own investment firm back in 2007. It started in 2005, but it didn't take it seriously until '07. And it was called VIP Motoring, where we basically helped individuals that had over $5 million in cash liquid assets to basically put it into alternative assets such as cars, watches, and art. Back then, I kind of knew that people would eventually look for alternative places to park cash, especially since I knew that there would be kind of a huge financial event coming up in a year or two after, and that led to '08. And so after that, I built this firm basically through the next 10 years, and then started actually building other businesses online and offline simultaneously. 10 years later, giving birth to Secret Entourage, a huge community focused around entrepreneurship, business, and financial education. And then I followed through with Exotic Car Hacks and Watch Trading Academy, 2 communities that basically enabled individuals to do what I had done for my clients back at VIP Motoring, but literally do it themselves at home through the online education platform. So I built all that. I authored a dozen books, 3 of which became really big, known as Third Circle Theory, Radius, and Gated Choice. This trilogy was basically the roadmap to human consciousness. And then outside of that, I own still another dozen companies between, dealerships, jewelry stores, or anything else from, like, I own another company called One-Off Investments that is basically a rare acquisition company of finding the rarest toys possible and ultimately allowing people to indulge in them. Now, the benefit of what I do is that most people work really hard throughout their life to make a ton of money so that they can buy a ton of stuff, right? They want to buy cars, watches, nice homes, and everything else. And I basically created a candy store where I buy that stuff anyways because it's just cool and I just love doing it. And other people are just killing to buy it from me. So in a way, I've made everything that I ever loved free. And ultimately that means that even if I made $10 a month, that would be enough to basically live the most outrageous lifestyle, because I never pay for anything I own. Like, from my real estate to cars, watches, the Ducati behind me, everything is basically free on the basis of understanding the financial models that govern the businesses that surround those assets,
Talk
So
to us
that's
about
the
that.
short of it, but there's a lot to it.
That's cool, man. Talk to me about that, because business is going well for me. I've got a nice watch or two. I've got a nice car. I'm not necessarily, my friends, for example, are obsessed with cars. So my friends telling me about this Mercedes that's appreciating and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, it's nice. But I'm not in that world. But at the same time, I like to dabble and I like these things. And I love these concepts that you talk about with, like, it's paid for itself. Like, I'm owning it, but I'm not having to pay for it. Talk to us about that. Is this like I'm buying, holding, and then on selling, and so I get to have some experience with it, or how does this all work?
So basically, it's called car hacking for the car side of things, and I'll breaking down in a very easy way. So when I was young, I didn't have a lot of money. I was pretty broke. I came to this country with nothing, with a single mother, and had to constantly reinvent ourselves to try to make something work. When I started working and I started making money, I wanted to find a way to basically have nice things, but I couldn't afford them. Like, in other words, I wanted a nice Mercedes, but $70,000 was a lot of money. And even though I was making 80, 90K a year working at a bank, I still thought, well, that's a lot of money to spend on a car, So it just didn't resonate with me to lose that money on a car. And I think most people today would think that cars are basically something that is a luxury, so you drive a car to and from work, but you only really drive a nice car, an exotic or luxury car, when you have the financial means to afford it cash. And it's basically an additional kind of expense that's not necessary, right? And so for me, it was the same thing growing up. But then I kind of understood that there are businesses in the world that basically revolve around the margin of such businesses. Like, dealerships obviously make money on cars, jewelry stores make money on watches. So in order to afford these things, I basically understood that I had to figure out how to buy cars like a dealer, and then how to buy watches like a jeweler. Except that the only downfall to that is that dealers buy cars and ultimately don't use them. So they buy low, they sell high. It's a very basic concept of supply and demand, right? For me, though, is I wanted to enjoy the car. So I was like, well, I don't just want to buy a car and sell a car, make money, flip in a car. I want to drive the car for a year, and then I want to get out of it. So I'm going to put miles on it. I'm going to have insurance. I'm going to have taxes. I'm going to have all these things, and I'm not a dealer. So how can I actually literally buy these cars, use them, and then still break even or make money? And so I came up, because I had a background in finance, I came up with a financial equation that basically allowed me the benefit of understanding which cars I could buy versus which ones I could not, which ones made sense and which ones had enough margin or not, and were trending on an upside depreciation rather than a downside depreciation. As a result, I knew that as long as I followed my own rules, I could get in, use a car for long term, like a year, 2 years, 3 years, even in some cases, get out of it and either make some money or at the very least break even, meaning, but still enjoy the car. Because as you said, you may not be a car nut, but I was. So I still am. I love cars. And it's something I was going to do anyways, meaning like at some point or another, you just realize that there are certain things you're going to do, right? You could go like, well, it's not financially responsible to travel maybe all the time because there is a cost to hotels and this and that. But then you suddenly at some point accept that you're making money to use it for something you love, And if you love traveling, you're like, well, I'll cough up the extra $5,000 for the hotel because I love it. That's what I want to do. That's why I work my ass off, right? And so for me, it was the same thing, except that the downfall of loving cars is that you love them only as much as the next one that shows up, right? So it's like you love it, then you love the next one and the next one and the next one. And the problem is there isn't enough space, time, and money to buy all the cars you could want. So one of the things I realized that as people, we get bored, and we want new things. And as we want new things, we tend to regret the financial decisions we made to buy them to begin with, because they're usually impulsive. And so, true to my system, I basically avoid that, because even if I made a mistake and bought something I didn't want, it's only a day away from getting rid of it and still being made whole financially. And as long as the financial burden isn't there, then why not? So the question I pose is, if you drove a Volvo to work and said that, well, that's a nice $70,000 Volvo, there's nothing wrong with it. Like, it's a nice car, it's beautiful, whatever. But what if you could drive a Porsche 911 Turbo for less money than that Volvo? And while maybe the Volvo was an exciting car because that's where you felt your financial status allowed you to afford, like a base Range Rover or something, but what if you could have like a Lamborghini Urus SUV and it was more financially rewarding than having a base model Range Rover? Would you not then buy that car? So that's the argument, is if the money wasn't the object, would you be driving the car you drive? And if the answer is yes, then I'm not going to teach you anything new. There's nothing you'd want to know. If your ego is that big that you think you've reached the pinnacle of your financial existence in cars, then I can't help you. But if you really look around and go, I would drive this better car if it didn't have to cost me money or more money than I'm paying now, depending on what you're buying, then that's when you want to start investigating if car hacking is for you, because you'll be able to get in a car that's usually 10 times better or more expensive than the one you have now, and it'll be financially smarter, which doesn't make sense to most people because they understand leasing or these terms that the auto industry has spent decades putting in our brains as the best way to buy a car, which is complete bogus bullshit. But people don't realize that, so they flow with what I call consumerism, which is basically they fall victim to ads and how systems work, or how these industries have paid millions of dollars to have key financial figures even talk about, like leasing a car. Like you have Sue Zorman talking about leasing a car is smart. And I'm like, that's financially retarded. You have other people talking about like the conventional consumerism is smart, but what people don't realize is these people have been paid over a decade to basically feed us this idea that the best way to be financially free is to follow conventional mindset, like work, save, invest, retire, and then get little money from your investment, which is ignorant. At some point, someone once told me, like, get an IRA. And I was like, what the hell am I going to do with an IRA? And they're like, well, it's going to pay you $3,000 a month. I'm like, what the hell am I going to do with $3,000 a month? Like, if I don't make $300K a month, I'm not living. I'm just wasting everybody's time, like in existing around them, because I can't really be free. So I was like, why would I want a plan that leads me to poverty and mediocrity? So in a way, very young, I kind of discovered that in order to break the mold of what conventional success is, you have to start thinking in the unconventional, or in ways, in what I call creativity. When you lack resources, you have to become resourceful through creativity, right? And hacking is basically the byproduct of being very resourceful and creative towards financial models that enable people to do this. And to be clear, this is not a car buying course. This is a financial course on educating people on what is available for them to take advantage of, to be in a better position financially with cars other than leasing.
Makes so much sense. I noticed that myself when, I picked up a couple investment properties, and people said, well, how did you get, 3 properties in 6 months? And in New Zealand, houses are expensive. So in Auckland, you buy a 3-bedroom house. One of them that I got was $1 million for a 3-bedroom property. And they couldn't understand. I said, well, this has some equity gained over this period of time. And I remortgaged and got more. And then my rent is more than my payments. And so I can park my money in an appreciating, rental property, and it goes up 7 to 10% and doubles every 7 years in Auckland. And they said, well, that doesn't make sense. If it was that easy, then everyone would be doing it. And I said, no, it is that straightforward. It's just that people don't understand because they're not playing the game, because they're not looking to play it differently. They're listening to what their friends, family, and neighbors are saying, who are not the financial geniuses or not creative with it. And so I love what you said, because it's understanding the rules of the game. And just because if you're listening to this and you're thinking, this doesn't make sense, I don't know how this works, that's why there's people like yourself, PJ, that are there to show us this kind of thing and think about the game differently, because you're right, we've been conditioned with how to think about money, investing, success, happiness. And, I talk about how we don't know how much time we have left, right? We have 168 hours a week. Imagine having a bank account that's slowly bleeding out. It's going to be spent. You just have to choose where it's being spent, and you don't know how much you have. And that's, that's life. So should we wait until we're 70 to then go and buy the old Porsche that, we wanted in our youth? Or can we?
Well, the argument is that most people want these things, right? Like I said, they want these things, and they know that if they were financially attainable or within their reach, they would buy a nicer watch, they would buy a nicer car, they would buy a nicer home. Like, why wouldn't you want that, right? If you worked your whole life to buy something, well, why don't you want something nicer for it? If someone offered you one house for 1 million and another house for 800 that was nicer than the million, would you not want that house? It would be ignorant to be like, well, no, I want to pay more for less of a home, because even though I know this is available. The issue is that most people don't know the other side of what's available, right? They're given 2 options, but they only see one option, so they don't know the other option. So the argument with everything else is that obviously, if you're not in the exotic car world, what I'm saying may sound foreign to you. It may sound like what I'm saying is too good to be true or impossible to understand. Just like some people in real estate would tell you they're getting loans on $3 million properties with 0 down. And other people would argue, well, that's impossible. And I would argue that maybe we're just not in that space to know how they're doing it. Instead of, yelling that something is impossible because it seems so far from your internal reality, you must investigate the information, especially if the outcome of this information is something that appeals to you in general. If having a nicer house, a nicer car, a nicer watch without having the financial burden of it is something interesting to you, then you need to investigate that information going onwards. And that's the beauty of the human mind, right? You can't just shut it down to saying, well, this is too good to be true when you don't understand the concept behind it. And I think the mind just wants to deter itself from doing more work. And people have gotten to a place where they believe that everything takes work. And they understand at some point that they're like, well, this program or any program won't do any such thing for me. And reality is that's correct. No program will ever make you money. But your ability to understand the information may or may not make you money or put you in a better financial situation or make you smarter or more capable of undertaking more complex financial transactions, But I think being afraid of stepping out of the norm is one of the reasons most people stay blind to the alternative option.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. People like the idea of things often. They like to want something, but then don't necessarily have solid reasons to actually go after it. People always talk about, I want more money, I want this, I want that. And it's about understanding that those things, they're not going to change the game. Obviously, for example, money to a certain point will make life a bit better, but then having an extra bunch of money in your account isn't necessarily going to make you happy unless you're playing the game well.
Exactly. So one of the strategies I created was called wealth transfer, right? Which was the idea of parking money. And I think this is something a lot of people don't understand. Like imagine this. Let's say you have $1 million in your savings account. Like you already have your house, your car, whatever. You've been fairly successful and you have $1 million saved. Well, that money is not FDIC insured. It's not anything. It's just sitting there. And you want it for liquidity purpose. You go, I'm going to have an emergency one day. I need this money sitting there. Well, you think to yourself, when was the last time you had $1 million emergency? This money sitting there doing nothing. It's being killed off by inflation itself. If you don't understand that, then I don't even know how you made it this far, right? But the core concept, the whole point here is that what if instead of having $1 million in your savings account, you had 30,000 of it in the motorcycle behind you? What if that was in your living room? In your mind, you would say, well, that's a purchase. And I would argue that's not. The money is just sitting there. Like it's not moving. Like that bike's sitting there as decoration. I would say it's pretty to look at too. Now, I think it's prettier to look at than an extra 30,000 in my bank account. Now, if I ever decide I don't like looking at it anymore, I can sell it and make $40,000. So the question is, would I prefer to make $10,000 over that motorcycle in a day or 2 or 3 or let's say a week if it takes it the longest to sell? Or do I prefer to look at 30K in my account and not moving anywhere, doing anything? And then if I look at it a month later, it's still 30K. And it's the illusion of basically having success. And you can do the same thing. I want to show you this because I don't know, you can see behind me, but it only makes sense to show you. I'm going to do it really quickly. The same thing we just talked about, you can basically look behind me and you see, there's unlimited cars here, like everything from, $800,000 car in that corner to, a Ford GT there. That Ford GT behind me in the red in the corner over there, right there, started at $250,000. $250,000. That's what I paid for that car. By next year, it's expected to be $1 million. I mean, try to think about that. Like, just try to think about that mentally. That may not make sense to you today. And that in itself is the problem. If it doesn't make sense to you today, then you need to investigate how it's possible for some people to do that. And you don't know how to.
Yeah. Yeah. So you talk about, I assume this is the same with watches. The same process applies.
80,000, look at this, 80,000 in, it's worth 250,000 today. That was 7 months ago. Tell me which vehicle will give you a 80 to 250K return over a 6-month period without ever risking the original 80K that went in it. Like the only thing I can think of is real estate. And even that has no liquidity, takes forever to move a unit. Even if in best case, you take a 30, 45 day close in a great market, you have all the paperwork, capital gains tax and everything else.
Yeah.
I mean, like I'm telling you, man, like people are missing out on this opportunity. Didn't mean to cut you off there on the watches.
No. Alternate assets. You're talking about like art, watches, cars, things like that. Talk to me about that a little bit more in detail. I know that I'm interested. I know that a lot of people listening to this will be interested in as well. There's well, at least my understanding, right? You get to a certain level of wealth and you start buying art, you start buying things like that. And people wonder, like, why are people doing that? How do they know what to buy? What's happening? My basic, and correct me if I'm wrong, basic understanding is, like you said, you're parking cash, which depreciates with inflation, into assets that hold, so that when you sell them, you can sell them for equivalent or more.
Well, that raised significantly. Like if you're investing in assets and not just buying to use, right? There's a whole different ballgame. I mean, like if you think about the typical statures, is there's two key criteria, right? The first one is what you call assets you use. Not every single exotic car or every single watch is an investment, right? And they're not. It would be a lie to say, if you just buy a Rolex, you'll make money. Like that's not true. If you buy, a Ferrari, it'll be worth way more later, so buy one. No, that's not how this works, right? There's a systematic strategy to which cars are financially good investments, which are not, and why, right? That's the problem. Most people go, wow, PJ just gave me a reason to go buy a Ferrari. I'm going to tell my wife we're buying a Ferrari, and then they lose 100 grand and they go, this didn't work. And I'm like, did you take the course? They're like, no, I just heard you talking on podcast and you said $100,000 Ferrari was worth something. And I was like, no, that's not what I said, but okay. So there is a systematic process to this, right? That's the first thing. The second thing to understand is that once you have your first car, your second car, maybe a couple of watches, etc., well, you're not going to wear 40, 50 watches, right? Like, meaning you don't need to have 10, 20 watches. So you start looking at assets more as not usage, but rather what makes sense money factor wise. Like which watches will most likely appreciate because I'm trying to make money, not preserve money. So I basically break down my process into wealth preservation as the first stage, and then wealth creation, right? Through assets. So wealth preservation starts when you say, I want things, but I'm buying them because I want them, and I'm buying them financially correctly to preserve my money, basically, to preserve its authentic cost, right? Plus the fact that it'll probably go up 3 to 4% a year, and you'll beat inflation, basically. That's the first way you look at it. But then you go, well, now I have more disposable income. I already have my other typical investments and ways I make money. Well, what else can I do? Well, then you start buying assets that are basically appreciating with a strategic plan to them. And that was for a long time what my business was, VIP Motoring, which was to basically do this for other people that had at least $5 million to do that, which were people who wanted to make money at the time, When I started these things online, I started teaching primarily wealth preservation because we were talking about limited capital. We weren't talking about millions of dollars to invest, right? Anyone with $10,000, $15,000 in disposable income could get into watches, cars, both technically, because you only need $1,500, $100 to start watch trading. So there are different levels to the game, And I'm not saying people need to have $80,000 or that's it, you're out, I'm just saying that the better you get, the better these ROIs get, on what you're buying and how it's working. But there are items that historically will go up significantly more money, than what they are brand new. And those create opportunity to ultimately create wealth. So if someone is already preserved their wealth through what they're using, their next step is to start identifying assets that are going to trend up in value. And there's also an actual training for that too, which is, investing in watches, investing in art, investing in cars that gives people the opportunity to at least no longer require a broker or a middle person to extort them thousands of dollars. When I say thousands, I'm being very generous. We're talking about some of these cars have 200K to 300K margins. Some of these watches have 50, 60K margins. Some of these art pieces have $1 million margin. You have to start understanding that if you don't know the intricate financial details of how these things work, well, you fall victim once again to consumerism. It's like, my art dealer gave me a great discount in itself is a flawed statement because you used an art dealer. So you already paid the 70% margin, right? And it doesn't even matter what next words come out of your mind. When you start that way, you're done. You already made them. It's like you already lost your money, right? If you start with my jeweler gave me, you're done. You lost. My car dealer, you're done. Doesn't matter. So the point is to replace the middleman philosophy and by really safeguarding ourselves against the pitfalls of not buying from a dealer or jeweler or art person with, what about fake watches, fake art, cars that are damaged or hurt. These are all the intricate systems that I teach. That's why it's so much more than, hey guys, just buy low, sell high. Cool. I'm PJ and I just made you money. That doesn't work that way.
So obviously, I'm thinking in terms of, let's say, watches, you would be factoring in, if you're wearing it versus if you're not. Certain things, like you said, are more preservation, where you're wanting to enjoy the thing.
So watches don't matter because they're like, unless you get them lost or you get the shit kicked out of you and someone steals it off your wrist, like that doesn't get damaged. It's not like a car. A car has mileage use, So there's a physical measure of value based on mileage, right? You would go, if a car has high mileage, it's worth less than a low mileage one. We don't say this about watches, where we say, well, if that watch is more than used on your wrist for 12 minutes, it's now worth less than if you wore it for 3 years. Because the condition means, if you're not an idiot, you're not going to bang your watch around or wear a $300K watch that's an investment to a day-to-day meeting where maybe you go shooting afterwards at the range and there looks like it's got case shelling. Right? You have to think of these things as investments, no longer as just a car, right, or a watch. Because think about this. I always tell people, if I had 300K like on my wrist, right, it's $250,000. So am I going to walk in the hood where I don't know where I'm going or in a bad part of town wearing that? Of course not. Well, would I walk around with a suitcase that said 250,000 cash in the suitcase while I go to a bad part of town? Probably not, right? Would I hand over a suitcase to a valet that I've never met and said, $300,000 cash in here, please don't take, there's no lock on it? Well, of course not. So why would I hand the keys to my $400,000 car to them? So what I'm saying is the mentality has to change all around. And this is significantly more than just thinking about it as, well, it's just a car, who cares? Because you're preserving the wealth, right? You're not there to run it to the ground. If you're the type of individual that doesn't value things and just wants to destroy everything, you're like, my kids are going to vomit in the back of my car every day, or they're going to take a screwdriver and plug a hole in the leather and I don't care, then yeah, don't do this. This isn't a financially intelligent, like at that point, just go rent a Honda Civic or lease one, destroy it, turn it over and be like done with it. It's a saving tool. But if you're the type of person that pays attention to things and understands, you look at your car typically after 3 years and go, my car looks better than everybody else's car, then you're probably the right candidate to start, because you're already preserving your asset in a way.
Yeah. This is interesting. This is really interesting. I'm definitely going to dig deeper into it. I like this idea. I like looking at things differently and figuring out what people are doing and how they're playing their game, because, I have an online coaching business and people look at me and think that's crazy. And how can you do that? And I don't know, you can make money on the internet. And those thoughts may have existed for me in the past. And now I know how to play the game. And I'm like, no, it's extremely straightforward. And, it's not this magical land that you might think it is. And that gap is just knowledge and understanding. And I think you have to find people who know stuff about the thing you want to do and siphon that knowledge off them. So in terms of that, if someone's listening saying, this sounds great, I want to find out more about it, where can they go?
So real simple, just go to learnfrompj.com and you'll see all my courses there: Exotic Car Hacks, Watch Trading Academy, as well as my work on human consciousness and awareness under Secret Entourage, and my books. So regardless of what your fancy is, if you like my thought process, or if you're like, hey, what he's saying appeals to me, but maybe I'm not ready for getting into alternative assets or something, there's a ton of stuff I've done that helps day-to-day people basically hack their lives into a better state, starting from the mind to consciousness to everything around it. And then to, of course, physical assets and money management and everything else. So I'm not for everybody, meaning my approach is very direct. But again, if you're more interested in the outcome than you are in the feel-good process, then you'll probably enjoy some of my content.
Yeah. So for you, did it start with the business stuff and then the mindset and everything sort of come later in terms of your interest in it and teaching people it, or did they come together? What sort of order did that happen for you?
So my societal purpose has always been to be a finance money guy. So I've always understood money. I've worked in it since 13. I've always been into the idea of understanding, give a dollar, take a dollar, borrow a dollar, share a dollar, how does it all works. But as I got older, with more wealth and wisdom, obviously comes more intelligence and capacity to act on that knowledge, right? But one of the things that I think I've done quite well in my life is that I've always only thought, and I started teaching later in life, not at the beginning, because teaching was always my passion. And what I teach can change and can alter, but I only teach from experience. Meaning I will always teach watch trading or watch investing as long as I continuously do it myself. The day I'm out of the business is the day I'll close my teaching as well. Because one of the things that's important to me has always been to teach from a state of authenticity, and more importantly, teach from a state of experience, not theory. And so a lot of my work, even my books that I talk about consciousness, are not theoretical in nature. They're journaling of my own journey of consciousness rather than talking about, well, hypothetically, if you did X, then Y should happen to you, So I've kind of done my own evolution and basically documented that evolution backwards, because that's the only way you can document a journey is when it's already taken its place, And so we live in a world, in my world anyway, in a world of facts, not a world of imagination. So everything comes down to reality. Like even when I was young, I was more interested in having a company that made me, for example, $3 million and left me $3 million in my pocket, rather than a company that made me sound exciting, and make $100 million, but leave me with $2 million in my pocket. I never understood the value of big numbers if your life or your net isn't improving, So one of the things that's interesting, as earlier we talked about my combined revenue, and one of my companies is the bulk of that, which made like last year over $300 million, like in just revenue, right? But that left me with maybe like 4.5 million, which isn't that big of a deal, Now my other company, for example, makes me $25 million, but leaves me with $20 million. So that's a significantly better company. And while it doesn't sound sexy on social media, it's not exciting to be like, oh, I built a $20 million company. It's like, but it's real, right? I'd rather build a $20 million net company than a $10 billion outside company that basically made me $1 million, but somehow made me take $10 billion in liability of transaction, which is insane. Like people that don't understand money typically get confused with big numbers and exciting factors. And that's why I said it's very important to start looking at life from a very realistic and authentic standpoint. And which I said, sometimes it'll hurt people, because I know there are people probably listening that go, well, my company makes 100 million. I'm proud of that, even if I'm not making that much money. And I go, well, yeah, but that you shouldn't be proud of that, because it's a liability more than an asset in itself to do that,
Yeah, 100%. I definitely get that, the realism of it. And I think that there's a lot of showing the lifestyle, where this is where people as well, they buy the watch or the car when they can't afford it. They don't understand the game. They end up becomes a liability. They lose money because they're wanting to portray something, and rather than enjoying it. And like I said, my friend loves cars, and he's always telling me about these different cars, and he's a BMW technician, and he has some cars that he is holding that he knows that are going to appreciate, et cetera, because he loves it. And so he gets to enjoy these nice cars that I might not, because he understands the game. And that's exactly what you're doing, which I think is incredibly powerful. I really love that idea of alternate assets, because you immediately think with assets, you go, well, I'm going to, buy real estate. Everyone knows real estate, right? Or whatever, a business. But there is a lot of different games you can play. Pokemon cards, for example. It's a wild thing going on at the moment. People are getting insane.
I like how you said it at the moment, because it's a very temporary thing.
It's currently hyped. I had Pokemon cards when I was a kid, and I don't remember people doing to this extent, and then things are coming back. Maybe it'll be around for a while, but we'll see. Yeah. I'm really interested in mindset and belief systems when it comes to success. And for me, success is, success could be a great relationship. Success could be I'm happy and content. I could be a good father. I could be a number of things are ways of measuring success, and it's up to the person in that regard. But consistently, people look to strategies and tactics to change the situation. If I had money, if I had this, I had that. If my wife was like this, if I was like this, then I would have the thing. But in reality, I think it was Tony Robbins said that 80% of success is mindset and beliefs, and 20% is mechanics. And the more people I talk to on the show, like yourself, who are successful in multiple areas, it inevitably comes back to beliefs and mindset over tactics and strategies. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So, I think if you start the conversation with if and something, then you're automatically a victim. And I think that my view on belief mindset is basically broken down in my own books. My book, Third Circle Theory, talks about basically the fostering of awareness, because I'm not a believer in mindset as much as I'm a believer in awareness. So I use different terms because I'm very big on using the correct terms to like kind of make sure that the generalization of terms disappears from my vocabulary. Like people today use the word entrepreneurship as employment or self-employment or owning a business. To me, entrepreneurship is about unity around creation, the opportunity to unite people around your creation. No creation means no unity, which isn't entrepreneurship, it's business. And I separate the two, just like everything else in life is always driven by a real definition, not a generalized one to kind of make people feel better. My view on mindset, belief, and values comes from the belief that every human being is driven by three stages of human evolution: awareness, self-awareness, and consciousness. That's why I call it the third circle theory, which is how to move yourself into a state of consciousness. The first stage, which is the first circle, is the mastery of awareness. And the mastery of awareness comes by destroying what I call the victimhood mentality of something happens to me. And I think that that is the first stage to evolve out of awareness and into the stage of self-awareness. Self-awareness, which is the mastery of what I consider to be identity. Like, what is your societal identity? What is your choice of identity in society? And then what does that transition look like once you start choosing what I consider a cosmic identity, which is an identity that is not driven by the acceptance of others, but rather nothing than your own in the true self. So, you know, I was a banker by a societal identity, but I'm a teacher by cosmic identity, meaning that regardless that people appreciate what I teach or not, I choose to teach. And I will always teach. And it's always been even my leadership style in my money function. You know, it's always been to teach teams how to be more effective at what they do rather than be the sales guy. You know, some people are very sales driven in their companies or do that. To me, it was always teaching. So my identity there, you know, is twofold in the self-awareness stage. And the only way to master the art of self-awareness is to understand, one, establish that societal identity and master it by the common denominator of money and public acceptance, and then evolve that into what I call cosmic identity and the ability to start your journey into the realm of consciousness. Now, how do we enter a realm of consciousness as humans? Is through the very simple act of entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship, which is unity around creation, validates our cosmic identity, unites others around it, and ultimately allows us to practice it. The more we practice it for a 10-year journey, the better we get, and the more we go through various stages that enable us to get to even higher realms of consciousness. The only difference between a human who is conscious or not, and it has nothing to do with writing your woke on your Instagram, if people were confused about what consciousness means. Consciousness is the art of understanding that time in itself is an illusion that only exists for those that haven't reached a state of consciousness. Meaning, once you are conscious, you're no longer bound by what I call the arrow of time, but you're bound by the experience of time. The experience of time in itself is the art of understanding that the illusion that time only moves forward is basically a total bullshit concept that's adopted by people who are unconscious. The idea is that if you are in control of your time, then you're conscious of your usage of it, at which point then the only focus point ever is the experience of it than anything else, and your choice of that experience. Which is why, for example, if you haven't made enough money, it's very difficult to choose the experience you undertake because you haven't mastered the second circle, which has a big component of money, you know, and your identity there. And without it, therefore, you're bound to other people's experiences of how money should be made. You know, so ultimately, however way you want to look at it, life can basically be explained through these three circles for every single human that exists anywhere, ever. So the core concept that I use as a measure of success, since you said that earlier, like it isn't money, it isn't family, it isn't any of that crap. I use evolution as the only concept that is a single measure of every human life in its existence from beginning to end. I look at the term evolution. How much have you evolved? How much have you pushed forward? Are you evolving through these three stages? Therefore, you're being successful, not as a black guy, a white guy, a rich guy, a poor guy, you know, or whatever background you are, whatever the educational like background you have makes no difference. If your evolution, which is a forward motion through these three steps, is basically on a continuous path of growth, then you're eventually going to reach a higher level of consciousness as a human. And that in itself, the experience that you undertake then is one of choice. But more importantly, to get there, you use choice as a tool. But only once you get there, you realize that choice in itself has always been an illusion. The real tool you've always had from the beginning that you never developed in the first two stages was called intent. And intent is the most powerful word in human evolution. And so if you start to adopt a value system built on intent of wisdom or deceit, rather than right or wrong or good or bad, you tend to find yourself creating some of the most unbelievable experiences you've ever had in your life, no matter how pleasurable or painful, you wouldn't have them any other way. I know this sounds kind of complicated, but again, this is why I said that the majority of my primal work in teaching is in the consciousness space, not in cars and watches, even though I'm fairly good at both of them.
I relate to that a lot. I felt that, you know, in the past I had a lot of anxiety. I was a lot more influenced by others. You could say that the flow, if you will. It was like I was in a river moving forward, and there was no choice. There was no awareness of how I was interacting in that. And I'm maybe not there yet, and I'm definitely going to get your book. But I feel that as I'm progressing, as I'm evolving, as I'm becoming more aware, I'm noticing more of how I have more of a control over how I'm feeling, more of a control over my environment, more control over my choices, and more conscious of where I'm placed, my intents, and what that's producing in my life as well. And I think that's super important. We all need to become, you know, more aware, more self-aware, more conscious. And I know that you said, you know, about choice and control, but I liken it to giving you more control, more choice, because when you are passive to it, everything else is influencing the destination. You're too enrolled in what everyone else is planning, thinking, doing.
Do you know where anxiety and depression come from?
I have my theories, but I'd love to hear yours.
Okay. It's from time moving faster than your internal evolution. So in other words, when time progresses, like the arrow of time in the physical shape, progresses faster than your own view or belief of your capacity to survive in the world, you develop anxiety. When you're so past that state that you can't change the outcome anymore, you develop depression. This is basically the concept of, not the clinical concept of bullshit psychology that they use in schools to teach you, but rather the concept of how your soul interacts with time in the physical and the third and fourth dimensional plane. So the simplicity of it is to just understand what I call the analogy of the apple. If you put an apple on a counter, what happens if it doesn't get eaten? It rots, right? It gets bad. Now, if you put it in a refrigerator, does it rot? Of course, it just takes longer. So it would take it 5 more weeks instead of 5 days. The only way the apple finds its salvation if it serves its purpose ahead of its time, which is to be eaten. If it serves its purpose behind its time, then it's a detriment to everything that happens around it. It kills, hurts, you get a stomach ache, you get sick, you're eating a bad apple, right? It's the same thing with the human body. It's the same exact thing. The refrigerator is society. You're just rotting slower. You have this illusion that you're not rotting, but you are dying just because you're not evolving. You have to serve your purpose before time takes its place. And if you fall behind, you go to a state of depression. You go to a state of anxiety first, which is the state between when the apple is incredibly good and the apple is bad, where it doesn't taste that great anymore, but it still won't kill you if you eat it. And then if you fall to a state of depression, you're basically rotten already, and it's now too difficult to catch back in that particular state. So you have to then internally choose to not give up anymore. That's why depression is a compounding factor that keeps people there over and over. And that's why there's no real cure for it. And that's why doctors keep giving you pills to basically put you back in the refrigerator, to make you feel like you're not rotting, when in reality, you're just dying. So the point is, the only way you can beat anxiety and depression is through a state of control that moves faster than the state of the time in that timeline in which you exist. So again, however way we look at this, time is ultimately the factor most people don't understand because they're still not conscious. So they're basically trying to beat the clock. This is also one of the reasons why the majority of people who don't reach a level of consciousness, but reach very high levels of wealth internally in the second circle through their societal identity, typically are looking for immortality. You know, they're like, how do I live longer physically? Because they still don't understand the game of consciousness. They're still lost in this state, thinking that they want to prolong their experience here on Earth at this moment, simply on the very basic element that they don't know how else to evolve. So their evolution in their mind has basically been tied to their societal identity because they never actually were seeking a cosmic identity past that. It's no different than saying you have to give up the good for the great, you know, and if the life is really good, well, it's harder to potentially jeopardize that for the great.
Yeah, this is good, man. This is good. I love it. Where can we get your book, The Three Circles? Is this from learnfrompj.com as well? Or is it
you can get it on there. You can get Third Circle Theory, Radius, which is the one about self-awareness, and then Gate of Choice, which is the one about consciousness. You know, so basically I wrote a book called Third Circle, which defines the 3 steps and the 3 evolutionary tracks, but then 2 supporting books to help people transition through them through the highest state of consciousness. Now, my books are nothing more than journaling of my own evolution, and they are not meant, to be clear, to be the exact direction on what to do. Consciousness is not a team sport. It is a person sport, which means that your journey of darkness and light will have to come from within yourself, not from one you read in a book. What I've done is simply prepare you for what's to come in those books that give you an idea and perspective on what's possible should you choose to push yourself to ensuring you serve your purpose prior to ending up in a fridge or in someone's belly rotting away.
Dude, this is so good. This is good. I'm definitely going to get a copy of this. It's you know, when you have an idea of something, you've thought about some things, and then you hear it in a different context and suddenly things click. That's what this has been for me. I really appreciate you.
Wait till you read my last book, Gate of Choice. You're going to lose your shit. You're going to call me and you're going to be like, this just made sense of everything I've ever heard of anything.
Yeah.
Like that's usually how it works. And for some people who understand that they're on that journey, that makes a lot of sense. For others who are not, who find themselves in this ego journey, which in itself is a plane of the first circle, the inability to get over the awareness and the victim mentality. That's where the ego takes over and justifies your existence. Those people typically find a lot of pain in reading my books. They like the apple that's rotten, and now like that depressed state we were talking about, right? Once that's kicked in, it's hard to accept that you've always had the answer to not being depressed right in front of you. You know, so that ego kicks in and justifies why it's okay to stay that way.
In a education, intellectual setting, right? With my background and things and training and having worked with people with anxiety and all that kind of thing, but also in coaching, I see it. So I'll say it less eloquently than you. People do often feel this wall of like, shit, I've actually had the option and the ability to shift things and I haven't, is a extremely powerful situation, either powerfully negative for them in their life and they choose to run away from it and act like that was never a choice and I had no choice, and you know, because they want to enable the story and the ego's fear of loss and realizing that, hey, I've created this. Or powerfully positive and empowering, where it's like, despite whatever has been, I now have a choice to recreate and to you know, as you said, fulfill my purpose. And for me, that was powerfully positive. And a lot of my clients that I've worked with, it's been powerfully negative, and they've just said, no, I don't want to continue. And it's been, old James, hard to understand why a person would, you know, run away from transformation when that's what they've said they've wanted for so long.
So listen, I've said this 100 times before. The truth hurts. That's all it takes. And people have asked me, what is the one quality you had that enabled you to not look back and move very fast through this? And the answer was really simple. Even since 13, it was self-honesty. It's all it was. If I was poor, I looked in the mirror and I was like, I'm poor. You know, if I was fat, I looked in the mirror and I was like, I'm fat. Like I don't like the way I look. And instead of justifying why I'm fat or why something doesn't work or why, something is as such, if I could change it, I changed it. If I couldn't change it, then I accepted it and I worked with it. Like I'm 5'7", I'm short. When I was younger, that was considered short. And I never used that as a negative because I can't change it. So I learned to use it, right? And then when you think about, like, now I can fit in exotic cars most people can't. Like the tall guys, they're like, oh, I can't drive that car. I'm like, I get to experience more than you. I'm like that perfect size for cars. I'm like, how fantastic. And then there are other things like I'm poor is a factor that I control and I can change. Now it might take me 50 years to change, but I can change it. And as long as I can, I will. And I think that is the attitude and the intelligence level of self-honesty that is required to find success in anything, is to understand what are the variables you can change that are non-favorable or improve even if they're favorable, and what are the ones you can't, and to stop dwelling on what you can't change within an instant. Like remove all emotions from a process and understand that the emotion is only hindering you. Emotion is ego. It's just preventing you from seeing the correct person when you're staring at a mirror. You're seeing the person your ego wants you to see. You're not seeing the person that can change. And to look past that ego and to see, can I change this outcome? And if it can be changed, then you don't have the right to not change it if it's not favorable. By not taking the opportunity to change it, you will rot away. And the cost is so large that you will one day look back and truly regret not having faced the mirror, not even the change, just not having faced the mirror that day and accepted who you could have been, and instead just accepted who you were shown you were and how satisfied you were because other people convinced you that that was just good enough.
I want to add to that real quick. Something that I notice with a lot of people is self-honesty, but not then justifying and saying, well, it's okay if, and it's that word if again. A lot of people, for example, they'll look in the mirror and they'll say, I'm fat or whatever, but they'll say, but that's okay because, who's to say this is bad or not? And I think this is when they're trying to play consciousness as a team sport, not as an individual sport. And for me, it's like self-honesty without justification. I can look in the mirror and say, I'm happy, not that I'm, I can't achieve X, right? I could, but I'm currently happy, versus saying that's hard to get to. So I'm going to justify why I still am where I am and I'm not changing. So let's say arbitrarily, I'm fat, but that's all right because, my body size is fine, even though inside I'm actually feeling like I would like more. There's this justification that holds us back from taking more action because we want to use, I don't know how I'd liken it to your levels, but I definitely feel like it partners well with one of those circles, is like what everyone else is telling me versus playing the game is just me and what I want.
Mm-hmm. I mean, look, in the end, people have created this falsified sense that we are here to help one another. They've created this falsified sense that we're only here and we're measured by how much we impact others or help others. I couldn't agree less with that statement. We are here first in charge and in control of our own internal evolution. Now, that we choose to help others or not, it's a personal choice. But to have people have expectations who are victims that others who are not will be the ones taking them out of victimhood is just, to me, has become a giant joke of what the entire self-help industry has basically formed itself around, right? And I think that that's very, very dangerous because it reinforces people waiting around to be saved. And it reinforces others making money off of those people waiting around. And so, when I think about that, I just think that that's why I said none of my books will be the answer ultimately, right? They'll just be an open perspective to understanding what's out there. That you choose to be a victim or not is a personal choice of intent.
100%. I like that because, you know, I've got kids, and if I'm constantly trying to help them and I don't help myself, the apple will rot, and then I won't be a help and I'll poison them. I've experienced that personally.
100%.
I see it a lot.
100%.
You know, our parents poison us because they don't work on themselves, don't help themselves, don't evolve themselves. They can't be more. And so when they try and help, it's not actually a help. Dude, this has been deep. I really appreciate you coming on. We've run out of time. I feel like I could talk to you for hours on this. We've got your details. We're going to put this all in the description. I want everyone listening to this to go and check it out. Even if you just want to know how to own some awesome cars and use alternate assets, but definitely the mindset stuff. I'm going to go and pick up all your books and rock through them all. Thank you.
And
so
let me
much
know
for
what you
coming on
think after you do it. I'd love to follow up discussion. You know?
I'll hit you up on Instagram. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming on the show, man.
Thanks again, buddy. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Everything shared will be in the description of the episode, so you can go and grab that. Now, if you enjoyed the show and you want to listen to more, please subscribe, because every week we're releasing new episodes with inspiring people, successful people, so you can level up your game. So subscribe and also leave us a review. We'd love to hear feedback about the show and your thoughts and opinions there as well. Now, if you want to have more success, whether it's in your life, whether it's in your business, we run live trainings every single week where you can get access to me to coach you through everything from health, wealth, success, business. We're doing topics on all things that you need to live a better, more inspired and successful life. Live trainings every single week. Just visit jamesnielsenwatt.com/live and you can get access to that. Now, there's also a ton of resources that you get for just listening to the show. All of that will be in the description. So if you are watching this on YouTube, check the description. If you're listening to this episode, check the description. We've got a load of resources there for you to have more success in your life, whether it's relationships, investing, or in business. I'll see you on the next episode. And as always, subscribe, leave a review, and tell your friends, because there's somebody else that needs to be hearing this, and maybe you're their opportunity to help them level up their game.